Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining the Great Analyst podcast. My name is Ahmed Hassan, and as always, we have a very interesting guest. Today with me is Kelly Wong. Kelly is a security intelligence analyst for the Canadian Senate. He has a history in international organizations like the ICC and others, and she's very passionate about humanitarian affairs and other security. And I would love to hear more about her career and what she's up to and what she's looking at right now. Kelly, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me this morning.
So, Kelly, I would love to hear a little bit more about your journey and what you're doing right now. Could you lead us a little bit into that?
Absolutely. So the journey started with my graduate studies when I pursued a master's degree in human rights and democratization in Venice, Italy. It's a joint master's program where I studied the first half in Venice, and I focused my thesis in security and constitutional laws in Uppsala in Sweden. And from there, I pursued my first internship at the International Criminal Court at the Investigations and Analysis Section, IAS, as it's known, at the Office of the Prosecutor. And from there, I met a wide range of professionals in the security intelligence industry from many intelligence agencies, so Europol, Interpol, and others. And this is where I was truly decided in pursuing this as a career. And from there, it led me on to other international organizations, UNESCO namely, and a private intelligence firm in London. And here we are today at the Senate of Canada.
Very interesting. I heard you saying that you did your course in Venice, Italy. I mean, there's worse places, I guess, to go to school than Venice.
Correct, yes.
But what I think maybe it's interesting for people to know how I know you, because I think it was 4 years ago
Yes.
that you and I first talked, and I remember that you were starting off your career and you just done at the ICC and
Yes,
you were looking
correct.
for other opportunities. And I was like, I remember because I even spoke about you. I was like, oh, she's so impressive CV, but I wish, that I could bring you on board back then. But you turned up really well, actually. You did really well. And I'm as I said the last time we spoke, I'm super proud of you for where you are right now and what you've been able to achieve in a very short amount of time. What was the ICC like? Like, what did you do there? How did your day look?
So the ICC was an experience that really did shape the rest of my career. I would say that was the launching point to decide that intelligence security is what I want to pursue for as a career. So as an IAS investigations and analysis section intern, each intern, what I can say is assigned to a specific case, an ongoing case, and we work directly with the prosecution, the team, the investigators, the trial lawyers, and we are assigned tasks related to the ongoing investigations. So that would be tasks, whether that would be research, analysis, as well as having the opportunity to attend trainings of how to use specific tools in the industry. So with that would be either research tools or mapping tools or any sort of even workshops that help improve the skills necessary so that one can continue in this field with the necessary aptitudes.
What do you think was what you've learned, the most valuable lesson, I guess?
I would say the most valuable lesson that I have learned in the industry is patience. Believe it or not, it would be correct. As an intelligence analyst, it is patience because often we are looking for, I would say, bones in an egg. And sometimes we need to be reminded that not everything can be immediate gratification. Not everything will be found immediately, even from harvesting the information to composing the report, to presenting the report, to presenting your findings, to disseminating information. It is a repetitive process, but it's a very important process.
All right. And that's something that I find interesting, what you just said there about the ICC. So when you work on the case and you do the research, and let's say you find something that is important for the prosecutors, does that mean that when they take it, that there is a possibility in discovery, for example, that you can be called to defend your findings?
Correct. Yes. So this is something that we were told, that it is a possibility that you would be called if your findings, or if the report or the evidence that you had submitted as an intern, as a staff, it is a possibility that you may be called to the trial.
Did that ever happen?
No, it has not happened. No, it has not happened for me. Yes, correct.
All right. Okay, so you are at the ICC. I think after that you went into the private sector. Where did you end up then?
So I ended up working for a private intelligence firm located in London, in the UK. And so shifting from an international organization to a private sector setting, the experience that I had in the private sector setting was that, for example, at the ICC, we were working, or as an intern, you work on one case for the entirety of your internship. At the private intelligence firm that I had worked at, it was constantly evolving. So there were assignments, there were tasks related to different client needs that were a revolving door in and out. And this experience really helps to expose you to what is there in terms of the private sector, but also in terms of how the pace that you work at in terms of case management, not in terms of the pace of the intensity of your work or the importance of your work, but in terms of how you will finish one task today and you can be on to a different case the very next day.
Can you say the name of the organization? Is that?
Yes, absolutely. I worked at, it was Sibylline Limited.
All right. And was there like an area of expertise you worked on and on like a certain problem set?
Yes. So I was the North America intelligence analyst, because being from Canada, also being bilingual, I was assigned to this region. And so my area of concentration was the United States, Canada, and Puerto Rico. And I would say the client set that I had were all North America based. So there was anything from daily reports, weekly reports, monthly reports, specific either location-based risk assessments to corporate investigations, CI as they had called it. Those were the assignments that I worked closely on with also the South America, Latin America analyst.
Cool. So you spent 2 years at Sibylline?
I spent 1 year at Sibylline. Yes.
1 year.
One.
All right.
Yes.
What was the reason for you to move on?
So firstly, the first reason was that at Sibylline, I had actually been the situation with having a single citizenship from North America was that there were visa issues. I had actually been working in Sibylline in the UK on a working holiday visa. So that was also coming to an end, expiring. And then it was very coincidental how it all happened was that I had actually applied for the position at the Senate of Canada, I believe a few months before I had even received an offer for Sibylline. And at the beginning of, I would say, April 2020, or it was right in the midst of the beginning months of the pandemic, I was contacted and asked if I was still interested in the position at the Senate, and it just fell into place so perfectly that I would be able to complete my contract at Sibylline and then start the position at the Senate of Canada and be able to return home after 4 or 5 years of working, living, studying in Europe.
Was that for you I mean, it must be difficult to be away from home, but did you feel that you wanted to go home, or it was just like the circumstances presented in a way that you went home?
I would tend to lean at the time to the latter. So it was very much the circumstances that led to going home back to Canada. But the more that now it is my third year working at the Senate of Canada, and I've more realized that it was something that I had been wanting to go home after quite a while. As you said, it is difficult to be away from home for stretched periods of time, and the demands of our industry as well. It means that you can't always travel back home or spend extended periods of holiday with family. But I would say at present, I'm quite content with the way that the circumstances rolled out.
It's good when things fall into place. So you go back to Canada, you start your job at the Senate, what you're doing right now. What was your situation back then, and how did the job start, and what were you focusing on?
So right now at the Senate of Canada, I am a security analyst. And as a security analyst, I work on the projects relevant to Parliament Hill. And the way that started out was very interesting, was that it was, I had returned to Canada, and I'm from Montreal, so I did not go straight to Montreal. I actually landed immediately in Ottawa at the capital, and I began working remotely with the team. So I hadn't actually met any of my colleagues until I think last year in person.
Wow.
Yes, I hadn't
because of COVID.
Correct. Yes, I hadn't met anyone. I had met everyone virtually through Teams, through virtual team building exercises, conversations, meetings, but I hadn't actually put a face physically in person to any of my colleagues until I would say the tail end of 2021.
That's pretty crazy. All right. And this is something that I'm really interested in, because I got these questions and clients have asked me about this too. You're working remote, and can you still work with classified material, and how does that work? Because you're working from home, and is that limited, or do you have to do any extra precautions?
So absolutely. So as any institution or organization would have, there is certainly a policy that we have to adhere to. So throughout the pandemic, when everyone was working more or less remotely, remote work, those standards and policies must be adhered to. So with such information, of course, there are situations where it must be in person, and those are non-negotiables. And then there are certain criteria and materials where you would consult and stick to the policy in order to ensure that you are dealing and you are handling all materials appropriately.
Now you can go back to the office. Did that make your work more difficult, like looking back?
We were able, even when I was working at Sibylline, it was remote for, I would say, 90% of my contract because of the circumstances with the pandemic. And I wouldn't say that working remotely made it any more difficult. It is nice to be in the office and to see your colleagues and to be able to discuss, and also to have it fosters a sense of camaraderie. But in terms of the work itself, I would not say that it has made it any more or less difficult with this return to office or being physically present.
Yeah, thank you so much for that, because this is a question I get asked a lot, because we work completely remote, and certain clients, we work on government contracts. Yep. They ask me, how do you get around this, and how do you ensure that everything is handled in a correct manner? And I think we do. So it's good to hear from a different side. So you're at the Senate. Can you talk a little bit about what do you work on specifically, or any like interesting cases, or not insights, you don't have to give that, but like what is your area of focus?
So to answer this question, I do apologize. I'm a little bit limited in what I can answer. However, I can say that it is related to, I can compare it to my experience at the international organizations. And I would say that, to give a generalization, my work it does involve aspects of international cooperation and diplomacy and such. But I do tend to focus now more on matters that are pertinent to Canada, as anyone would be working in their national government.
I think a lot of people, when they hear Canada and intelligence, they might frown a little bit, as it's maybe not known as much for its intelligence capabilities, or just purely for how Canada is seen in the international community. Can you say a little bit about I'm just trying to choose my words carefully, but the expertise that exists and where, like for example, where you look in the US or the UK, there is a very developed government sector as well as very developed private sector. Like, how is intelligence viewed from the policymaker side and from the society and from your colleagues on intelligence? That's something I'm interested in now.
So to answer this question, I will also answer I will try to think of a very cautious way of answering it as well. But sitting from the Canadian perspective, I would say, and you had mentioned, our neighbor, the US, having very developed even either federal organizations or private sector, I would say that Canada is there. We are certainly there. Perhaps less seen, but it is certainly developed in the capabilities that it has. And I mean, for myself, I'm very proud to be a part of that, for that service in the national context. But yeah, I think that's where I would leave my answer.
Fair enough. Can you talk about, I think we've in this podcast, we talked a lot about the role of open source intelligence, of OSINT. And I think there's an overemphasis on tools, and a lot of people listen to this podcast, they want to know more about that. But I also want to know just about the process and the analytic rigor that is involved in OSINT. And does that impact your current job, and how do you engage with that?
So I would say that OSINT is a skill that's essentially a core skill or a core application that I had to employ from the very beginning, from my very first internship at the ICC. And it doesn't just stop there, or it's a continuous development. So as you had mentioned, an overemphasis with the tools, it is more for the individual analyst and how they use these tools, as would be for any situation, right? The individual analyst has to also know through experience, which at the current stage I'm at, mid-career, I would say that experience and learning from peers, learning from senior analysts, learning from upper management or people who are upper on the echelons of this industry. This has been such an invaluable asset for me, is to learn. Because there's so much that you can learn in a training. There is so much that you can learn from listening to podcasts and what are the tools out there and how they can be applied. But how to use them is a different ballpark. And, you know how to use these tools, but also it's what is the information, or how valuable or how actionable are the information or intelligence that you're inputting into these tools.
Is there anything any open source techniques or tools or databases that you use a lot, or that you like to use?
So I also have to be cautious and limit my response to this. So I do apologize. I will have to respectfully skip this question.
Okay, no worries. So I think for me, what is interesting to find out is, as you said, you're in a mid-career point, and what are the most important experiences that you had that really shaped and helped you where you are now? And it can be personal experiences or professional, but I would like to know what really set you apart to get to where you are right now.
I would say personally and professionally, it was a lot of the international experiences. So not only completing graduate school in another continent, but also actively seeking to pursue or to complete my trainings and my internships in different organizations and in different countries. So it went from Italy to Sweden to The Hague to Paris to London. And the reason why I say that these experiences are very valuable is because it built that network. So there was so much that I could learn in my courses and so much that I could learn from and apply in my traineeships or internships. But the connections that I've made and the exposure, the networks, those you can't. The only way that you can obtain those are through being in the country, because you meet professionals from the same industry but in a different national context. It's very much the way that I had met yourself. I don't know if I would have perhaps connected with you had I not been at the right place and the right time in The Hague with the profile that I had at the time. I could say the same about many of my colleagues at the ICC, located all over the world, because now I have colleagues who are either doing missions or assignments or have posts in all continents. I could quite literally say that I would know someone who is either working at an international organization or at an NGO or any local organization. I would say almost quite literally every country.
Amazing. Are there any specific experiences that you can point at and say that really shaped you as a person, as a profession, that you can think about?
I would say that the experience of being alone in this, alone in the sense of navigating not being from Europe and having spent my whole life in Canada up to the moment that I had moved and I started off in Italy, this was an experience that did shape me in terms of the independence, but also the resourcefulness of finding the right callings for pursuing this career. So not only at the ICC, but that did lead into, exposure into what else is out there. How can I advance my career? What else can I do? Or what are the right opportunities or the right connections that I need to make in order to succeed in this field? And it's similar to what we had spoke last time, was that I had met professionals who had given me advice. So following the ICC, it was UNESCO working on extremely interesting initiatives and projects at the headquarters in Paris, and moving there alone, figuring it all out again, because every time I had to go to another country, it was another visa process, another moving, opening, even down to opening accounts or figuring out the city and all the amenities. It's a humbling experience, but it's also a huge personal development and growth to have to navigate all of that while completing your internship and while building those networks and gaining that experience.
Yeah, it's amazing because you're traveling by yourself and as a woman. I think
yes,
that makes you a bit more vulnerable, if I may say that.
Absolutely, I do agree with that. I do.
And I think for me, like what I'm interested in, and one of the reasons why I set this podcast up is because I want to demystify the process and to show that we are all humans and we have all these experiences, and people often only see like where you are, but they don't see how you got where you are. And which is why I want to like dissect a bit, your journey. And I wanted to ask you, because I think there's something that we have in common. We both come from minority backgrounds. Did that impact your journey, and how did that impact you, or didn't you think about it?
So it has. I would say that it did impact my journey in the sense of making me more aware of my minority background. I'm not sure how to put that into words, but there was a point where
I know what you mean.
yes, lightly put. I mean, I'm not shy or ashamed to admit that there was a point where I was submitting CVs and my full name is Kelly Christine Wong, and I would put Kelly Christine W. And whether that was, an coincidence or experiment, I did notice that often when I had omitted my surname, that I would receive either a callback. And again, this could be purely coincidental, but there were situations where it was more, how can I say, put in your face that you might be, that there are certain perhaps situations where your background or certain physical features were taken into consideration perhaps. And when I was writing, for example, my resumes, I had been coached that there were certain resume writing tips that say include a photo and include your nationality because it humanizes your application. But at one point I had stopped doing that because I didn't quite think that was helping my situation.
Or relevant.
Or relevant, correct. But this was a tip that I had received, and of course, being a fresh graduate and trying to get a position, of course, you're going to take the advice of persons who are more experienced than you. But at some point, you sort it out on your own. And I would say that yes, it wasn't always easy, coupled with being, as you said, a woman and being exposed to certain different vulnerabilities, also traveling alone, moving alone, stabilizing yourself alone in a new country. And so this could be an entire subject on its own.
Yeah.
But yeah.
But good on you for going through that and also exposing yourself to that. I think that's very important. I would say there's people listening that might have a similar journey as yourself or as me, because I know exactly what you're talking about. I think if you have to change your name or the way your name sounds or you spell it or whatever to get opportunities, then maybe that's not an opportunity that you want in the first place. And the problem is you will never know. That's the issue. You'll never know that you got
Correct,
it,
exactly.
because you did that or you didn't, right?
Exactly.
But I think I'm experienced enough to know that it definitely plays a role. I have more opportunities in my life as an owner of my own business than I've gotten as an employee. And that is a fact that I know and I know my experience. So yeah, that's very interesting. And I don't really get the chance to ask that to guest on this podcast. So that's why I wanted to know it from you. And because I think this is also interesting for people to know, like, hey, you're gonna meet struggles, but you have to just get through them. And that's what gets you where you need to be, I guess, and not give up.
Absolutely. And I couldn't agree more.
Yeah. So, all right, you're now as a Canadian, you've been there now a couple of years. What's next for you?
Well, it is a continuous growth. And of course, I'm definitely not complete with my journey in the industry. And I'm looking to see what other ways that I can, for lack of a better word, put myself out there and to, as you said, everyone only sees the resume or the LinkedIn profile, and they don't see all the steps that come with it. So I think it is most definitely part of my journey, my growth, my trajectory in this domain. And I would say what is next is, I'm not certain what the future holds, but I am definitely not finished with my role in intelligence or analysis and service in this industry.
do you, and you know I'll push you on this, is there an industry, a job, an area, a country that you would like to work in?
I wouldn't say there's a certain geographic area that I would prefer or that I have a preference to concentrate in. I would surely say that North America and some certain countries in Europe would definitely be within my realm of expertise. But I would very much like to continue in my career, or to really stabilize myself and make that my professional calling in security intelligence analysis, continuing with working with intergovernmental or international organizations, or even federal organizations. Just all of that, let's say that international collaboration is definitely within what I was trained in and what I see myself continuing my career in.
You definitely know how to speak like an intelligent professional, so you're not tying yourself down to anything. All right. So I know the last time we talked about this before the podcast, you mentioned that you like doing mentorship and advice and guidance. Is that something you would want to do more of, maybe specifically, and is something you thought about?
Oh, yes, absolutely. So currently I'm a mentor for my first university, McGill University in Montreal. And I've recently joined the mentorship program at the GCA, so the university located in Italy. There are different branches, but this one is a global campus alumni. So I do have quite a handful of students, and this mentorship relationship, or the objective of these mentorships, are to connect alumni or persons who are established in the field with either final year students, recently graduated students, or even first year students, to help them navigate this. Because as we were talking about, it's not quite a linear path in this industry. So to have someone, I myself did have a mentor as well, to understand how I could build from the ground up in this field. And so this is something that I'm absolutely interested in continuing. And even if it's not through the university services, I often get messages or receive emails on LinkedIn or to my personal email with questions from young professionals, or even more established professionals, asking for discussions or for tips. And it is a pleasure to organize a virtual call to respond to any specific career building questions, and I would definitely not turn that away.
Be careful what you wish for, because I get bombarded by people asking to give them the emails of people that are on the podcast.
Oh,
but I guess if they want to find, they can find you on LinkedIn. But so I already apologize in advance for the amount of people that are going to reach out to you.
No issues at all.
What do you have as an advice for a young professional or a mid-career professional, for that matter, from your perspective?
The advice that I would leave is to stay the course. It isn't easy. Often from myself, when I see the profiles or I hear the professional journeys of other people in the industry, it can be intimidating, because you see these profiles, you see all of the successes, but again, as we said, you don't see the struggles, you don't see sometimes even the failures that came with that. So the advice that I would give, it's more of I would say a character or a motivation, is to stay the course and to understand that this was not built in a day. It took a long time to build, and that as a young professional in this field, it will take the time that it needs to take to where you need to get, but to also not be shy to reach out to those persons with those profiles. If you see them either via LinkedIn, or you read one of their papers, or you listen to a podcast and you hear of them, don't be shy to reach out, because through networking, that itself opens so many doors.
Yeah, that's great advice. So at the moment, professionally or just for fun, what are you reading? What are you listening? What are you watching? Is there anything that you're doing in that regard?
So recently I have been reading a book. I believe the full title is called Top Secret Canada. And it is about, it is a very interesting book, and it goes to explain how Canada's intelligence services and other federal organizations, institutions were created, and what are some of the challenges they face, and how they cooperate with one another. So it's very interesting to see from the foundations of how such services were built in Canada. And in terms of watching, there's an interesting one, which I think as intelligence analysts we would find interesting to watch, The Night Agent.
Oh yeah, I've heard about that. I have not watched it.
Yes. So it's quite. I think you would enjoy it.
I'm going to watch it. Have you seen The Diplomat?
I have not, but I have also been recommended. It's been highly recommended to.
Yeah, I think it was a really good one. Yeah, I think we watched it like in 3 days.
Oh.
Well, it's a good one. I can recommend it. There are bits that are dramatized, but I think like if you're in this and you know, like, oh, that's interesting, you know, like how they talk about things. But yeah, I found that fascinating. Do you have any questions for me?
I would say yes. I do have a question for you. Would be, how did it I think it flows, or it continues the conversation on the topic that we had just a few minutes ago. How did you come to Grey Dynamics, the idea, you establishing this, if I may ask?
I think I've answered. I was asked this question last week, but I will give you this is a bit of like, you give me a bit of variation of the question. So when I was back in East Africa, I think it was in 2014, and I was sitting down in a compound, and I was like, what am I doing in my life? Because I'm working and I have no social life. And I see like everybody on Instagram, and you know, they're going all with their lives and their families and whatever. And I'm like, what am I doing? I'm just here. I felt a bit stuck. So when I was doing the work that I was doing, I felt that analysis was not really there. It was mainly like, you know, develop a target package and do the next steps, arrest or whatever. And I felt a bit stuck in that. So when I decided to go back to school, that was in 2014, I had an idea what I wanted, because I knew I didn't want to come back and continue doing what I was doing. So when I got to Brunel, where I was studying for 1 year, which is maybe a year or so before I met you the first time, me and Seju Kim, who founded Grey Dynamics with me, started talking, and it was just like almost daydreaming about what we wanted to do after school. And I guess throughout our like countless hours of talking, we just came up with this idea of setting up a company, which conceptually was very different than what we are today. It was never thought to be this public as we are. We had pretty public profile, but that was never the case when we started. And there was a lot of technology involved back then, less so today. And that was in 2016. And then we got an opportunity to work on a report even before the company was formally established, somewhere in Africa, and it was written by a private intelligence company in London. And the client was like, hey, we have this, but it's not really useful for us. So do you think you can do better? And we were like, all right, can we have a look? And we had to sign an NDA and everything. We started reporting. We knew who wrote it. And we were like, oh yeah, this is not really good. And we were like, if this is going to be sold for this amount of money, we can do a better job than this, right? For half of that, right? And not knowing like how the the world works and how the game is played. But so that's like we did that. We did really well. We got work from that. And then, well, there's something here we started business in 2017. We're leaning heavily on like machine learning algorithms and like collecting data and I'm making that more usable and processed for to conduct analysis on. But as we went on, I felt like a lot of people are doing that, and still it's not really intelligent. It's not really actionable. It's just telling you what happened, but doesn't give you the so what and what next. So I was like, hey, I understand that companies and governments and organizations want to know what's going on, what they should do. And I know that technology is an important component, but what I knew that I could compete with and I could do really well is, as you mentioned, I have a network and I started leveraging the network more and more, and particularly in Africa. So when we get clients and they want to know, right, I know what's going on, but I want to know what that person or that industry is thinking of. So that's something that we set ourselves apart with. And I think like the human intelligence side of things is I think for us now, our backbone. What we do offline. Online is a little bit different. It's a bit of a mixture of everything, but so more all source. But that's kind of like how Gray Dynamics came to be in a succinct as way as I can say it.
To hear that from my personal perspective and opinion, it's just impressive. That's all that I can really put as in words. I mean, it's just, as you said, it was an idea that was conceived while you were finishing your studies at Brunel, and I mean, likewise, in such a short period of time from when I had met you and you had introduced to me the Gray Dynamics as a firm, and to reconnect half a decade later and to see where it's at now and the services that, or the liaisons that you have and that you provide. It's really, thank you for keeping in touch.
Thank you. It means a lot. There's one other question I wanted to ask you.
Please.
I kind of skipped by because I think this is what people also be really interested in. You speak a lot of languages. I mean, I speak a lot of languages, but I mean, you speak a lot of languages. Can you give, because this is advice that people ask me this all the time. What languages do you think are important, especially if you want to work in intelligence? And what advice do you give to learn new languages?
So I would certainly say not that any language is more important than the other, but in terms of just the general industry that we work in, the UN have 6 official languages. So I'm not telling you to go learn all 6 fluently, but if you can gain a certain level of fluidity in those would be very helpful to your career. What I found that helps learn a language is to immerse yourself in it. So there's so much that you can do with books. There's so much that you can do with Duolingo, the little owl, and there's so much that you can do with Babbel. But what's helped me is to speak with either friends who have who are native speakers of that language, whether that's just a telephone conversation. And I've asked my friends if they're listening, they'll know who I'm speaking to. Well, please speak to me in Italian so I can practice. Please write to me, text to me in Italian. They'll know who they are. But that really helps because those are you learn on the spot, right? The grammatical skills, the fluidity, the language, how can I say, the expressions. So that's an advice that I would give. And also definitely if and when time permits, to obtain, it's an advice that I should also take myself, is to obtain some sort of certification so that you can add that to a sort of official certificate to your profile, that I have C1 or I have B2 in language A or B.
Mm-hmm.
So that would that's definitely the advice I would give. Yeah, languages is I would say is a very important skill, or multilingual is an important skill to have in our industry.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess that's one of the one of the main positive things I think of growing up bilingual is that part of your brain automatically gets developed, right?
Yes.
So it makes it easier to learn other languages. So I don't know how that is for somebody who didn't have that. I guess it's a bit more of a struggle. I want to, first of all, thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate it. I know it's very early for you right now, your day. And so I really appreciate you making the time to do the podcast and sharing your story. And it's a very interesting and very impressive story. And yeah, I want to thank you so much really for being a guest. I feel like the time has flown by really quickly because we've been only talking for an hour.
Well, I would like to thank you for having me and for reaching out and for maintaining this contact throughout the years. I mean, yes, the time has flown by in the podcast, but even in the amount of years, it's quite, it feels like we spoke yesterday when I was still an intern, and here we are, 5 years later.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, I remember very vividly because when I spoke to you then, I think I had my laptop and I was visiting my parents in the Netherlands. And I was sitting in like my old bedroom during a meeting. And it was just funny, like to think back now, like how much has changed in my life, and not just professionally but personally too. So yeah, it's interesting how time flies and how life changes. Is there any like last thoughts you have that you would want to share, mention?
I would. The only last thoughts that I would have would be to advise professionals who are either starting off or at mid-career, as myself, as I've said already, is that it is an uphill. I won't sugarcoat that, but it's a very worthy uphill. It'll be worth it.
Great. That's as good of a parting take that you can have. And for everybody listening, if you made it this far, thank you so much, guys, for all the support. I know the podcast has been not always on as much as it is normally because I'm traveling a lot. But I appreciate everybody for listening and for the comments, the reviews. So I appreciate that. Please continue doing that because it helps me and it helps us improve and helps this podcast being found by more people. I hope in the next podcast I can make a big announcement. We're working on something. So yeah, stay tuned for that, guys. Continue to follow us. And if you have any questions, please reach out. I'll put Christine's LinkedIn in the description if you want to reach out to her. And yeah, thank you guys. And again, thank you, Christine, for taking the time. Apologies. Me using your middle name.
Sorry. Thank you. Thank you very much for having me.